everyone, it's Stacey and today is my mystery block of the month reveal for block number 11, and we're doing this super cute block which is called the Eccentric Star Block. You can find all the details you need in the description below, so let's get making our Eccentric Star Block. To create this block you're going to need 5 different fabrics, and for the feature fabrics here that create the star effect you're going to need 4 fabrics, and they're for pieces A, B, C and D. And you'll need to cut for each of those fabrics 1 piece at 5 inches by 5 inches squared. Then you'll need to cut the E pieces, which are going to be marrying up with the feature fabrics. So we'll cut 4 pieces at 5 inches by 5 inches squared. And then for the center piece, which is F, 1 piece at 4.5 inches by 4.5 inches squared. Now let's move on to how to make the block. So I'll just set aside my F piece, and then I'm going to take all my E pieces and I'm just going to draw a line on them on the diagonal, so from corner to corner. So I'll just take my ruler, find the corner and place it there, and then I can see my ruler's right off at the bottom here, so I'll just line that edge up too. So I'm ruling a line from corner to corner. But I'll just make sure that my ruler is in the right place before I start drawing. And then I'm just going to draw a line that we won't see, but it's going to be our guide for sewing. I'll do that on all 4 pieces. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my A, B, C and D piece and I'm going to marry them up with one of the pieces that I just drew the line on. Now, sorry, I did forget to mention that if your fabric has a right side and a wrong side, draw your line on the wrong side. My fabric doesn't have a right or wrong side, that's why I just drew it on as it was. But now I'm going to make sure that I'm placing them right sides together. And because I've drawn my line, well, this is my wrong side now, and that's my right side. And I'll just make sure all the edges are lined up nicely. And then I'm just going to place a pin on either side just to keep it in place for when we sew it. And we're going to be sewing down each side of the line with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, so just make sure your pins aren't in the way. So next piece of fabric, right sides together, making sure all those edges are lined up, popping a pin in, and I'll do this for all 4 sets. Okay, let's sew them together. So now I'm going to take each piece and sew down both sides with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and I've worked out the best guide for me. I don't have my 1/4 inch foot on because it's got that lip which will catch it, but I've already tested it out and worked out the best guide for me. I'm going to be stitching at stitch length 2, and I'm using my Oracle thread, which is what I like to use for piecing. And I'm just going to start on the very edge and come all the way down off the edge, using the line that we just drew as our guide. Now at this point you could cut it and turn it around and do the other side, but I'm just going to sew these all in one go. So I've stitched off the edge and now I'm just putting my next piece under, starting right at the edge and going to carry on. And I'll do that for all 4 pieces. Okay, so then I'm just going to cut my thread and cut it in between the 4 pieces. And then I'm just going to turn around. Sorry, I'm going to cut that thread. And then I'm just going to turn it around and do the same on the other side. Okay, so then I'm just going to trim the thread again and where they're joined. and remove the pins. So all I'm going to do now is just give them a press so they're sitting nice and flat, and we'll also be setting the stitches for all 4 pieces. Okay, let's move on to the next step. So what I'm going to do now is cut them in half along the line that we drew. So I'll just take my ruler, place it on the line, and if you did your 1/4 of an inch seam allowance properly, you'll see the 1/4 inch mark sitting on top of your stitches. My stitches are scant and I'm being nice to myself. Don't do yours like mine, make sure they are 1/4 of an inch. So now I'm just going to cut along that line on all 4 pieces. Now we're going to press them open. So for each of my pieces, I'm just going to open it up, make sure I'm pressing the seams towards the dark fabric. I'm going to just give it a finger press, making sure we don't have any creases in here. We want them sitting really nice and flat. And then when I'm happy, pressing it. Oh, my iron likes to be held on the handle, otherwise it pops up itself. Okay, and then I'm going to do that for every single piece. So now for our half square triangles, we're going to square them off to ensure they're 4.5 inches squared. I've got my Creative Grids ruler here, which is 4.5 inches, and it's really handy. All I do is place the line on my ruler, on the seam on my block, and then I just make sure it's fitting in within the block. For example, I don't have it down here like this where part of the block is not under the ruler anymore and I've got a lot of excess here. So I just make sure the block is sitting underneath the ruler on all 4 sides, and when I'm happy, I press down firmly and trim. Now I like to do every side as I go. I'm not one of those people that can cut and then go across like that. I don't know, it just doesn't work for me, but just do it however it works for you. Okay, so that's one block done. Now if you don't have a Creative Grids ruler, that's okay. Take your regular ruler, and what we do is we just place the seam on the 45-degree angle line, just like we did. And then we just count 4.5 inches because we want to cut them 4.5 inches squared. So 1, 2, 3, 4.5, and I can see I'm actually a little bit off here. So I'm going to just move it up along that line, making sure we do fit in. And when I'm happy, I'll cut this first side. Then I'll just turn it around. Line up that 45-degree line on my ruler on my seam. Now line up the line that I just cut at the 4.5 inches mark. So 1, 2, 3, 4.5. And then when it's all lined up, I'll trim this side. And then I'll turn it just once and do the same on the other 2 sides. So this time my 45-degree line is going this way, and I'll just do exactly the same. Line up the seam on that line on my ruler. Check I'm within 4.5 inches, and I am, so I'll cut. I'll turn it around. Line up that 45-degree line on my ruler. Find 4.5 inches on my ruler and line up the edge I just cut exactly on the 4.5 inches mark, and then cut off this excess here. So we've done exactly the same thing. It just takes a little bit of working out with your regular ruler. So now we need to do that for all 8 of our half square triangles. So we're on the home stretch now. I'm just going to place my pieces down so that they match the diagram here. I'll start with my F piece and pop that in the middle. Then I've got all my pieces here paired up in their half square triangles. So I'll just pretend that this fabric here was my A piece. So this is my A piece here. We want the bottom of the fabric, the solid A fabric here, and then we want the diagonal coming up to the top right hand corner. So we'll pop it there. Then I'll take the next piece and we want the solid A fabric coming along this side and the point going up. So it's not doing that. So I'll turn it around so it is. So now I can see it's matching the diagram. I'll pop that there. And then I'm going to carry on and do the same for all the other pieces. So there we go. Now, before we sew them together, just take a good look and make sure that you are recreating the image here. We kind of want the stars to be coming off and shooting out. Can you see how that's happening there? So just take a moment and make sure it is all in the correct position, because it is easy to get them accidentally facing the wrong way. And then once you've sewn them together, I know sometimes it's a bit hard to unpick and fix that up. So let's just make sure it's right off the bat. And now you all know the steps now to sew them together. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to fold this one on top of this one, pop a pin in loosely, and I'll come back and sew that together nicely. And I'll do that for all 3 rows. I'll sew them together and then I'll press the seams so that I can nest them. And when I say that, I mean I'll press one set of seams for one row in one direction, one set in another, and the last set in the other, so that way they're all in different directions so we can nest those seams. But you should all know the ropes now. So now I'm just going to sew these together with my 1/4 inch seam allowance, starting at the beginning and the end for all 3 rows. So for all the pieces, all I'm going to do is make sure all those edges are lined up nicely on the sides and at the top. Pop a pin in just to keep it in place, and I'll sew. I'm stitching at stitch length 2. I've got my 1/4 inch foot on, and I'm starting at the beginning and coming all the way to the end, and I'll do that for all 3 rows. So when we come up to sewing the 2 blocks together that have the half square triangles, I just open it up and make sure that it's creating one nice straight line, so that when we open it up, those seams are sitting really nicely. And then I'll just take my pin out, make sure everything else is lined up, pop a pin in and sew it together like the rest. So I'll just trim those threads and now give it a quick press. So now I'm just going to press the seams. Each row will be in a different direction when we've done this all before, but do make sure that they're placed in the correct order so that the seams will nest at the end. So once again, just making sure the rows are sitting in the correct position so we sew them together correctly. I'm just going to fold this top one down on the middle one, and I'm going to find the seams and just nest them. And I'll put a link in the description below about nesting. So I'm just going to open it up, check I've got a nice straight line, push those seams up against each other and pop a pin in to keep it in place. And then find the second seam and do exactly the same. And then I just like to put a pin in at the beginning and at the end, making sure all those edges are lined up nicely. You can pop one in the middle if you'd like. I'm not going to worry about it today. And then I'm just going to sew with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, just like I have previously, and then I'll sew the last row on. So I'll just cut the threads and give our block a final press. So just setting those stitches. And then it doesn't matter which way the seams get pressed. Giving it a finger press, making sure I'm happy with how it's sitting, and then pressing. It is quite bulky on the corners where the 3 points are meeting up, so if you'd like you could press those seams open. It's just a personal preference really. And now I'm going to give my whole block a press because I love pressing. And there we have our Eccentric Star Block. So there we have it, the Eccentric Star Block, and I really love it and I hope you do too. Now next month we'll be doing block reveal number 12, which means we'll be finishing up our mystery block of the month. And then what I'm going to do is show you how to do the sashing, and we are going to do cornerstones, which is a new technique for us. And then we'll do an outer border, and I'll have all the fabric requirements over on my website, and that's also in the link in the description below. Thanks so much for joining me, and I'll see you again next week.